they encouraged the social scientists to carry out research on uh, the reasons of economic backwardness of these countries. Why actually the underdeveloped countries, or why these developing countries, those who got independent from the colonial power, still they remain economically backward. So to know those causes and reasons, these countries they expanded their research areas, and they prompted their social scientists to carry out research on these countries, and as a result of which series of studies were conducted, and many as you know, series of studies were conducted, and series of projects were carried out to understand the causes and reasons behind the backwardness of these countries. And finally, and if you see this group of scholars, those who were engaged with conducting these studies, they were not from a single domain or from a single discipline. They were chosen from diverse disciplines and diverse subject areas. Sorry. So, if you take the example, there are scholars from psychology, there are scholars from sociology, there are scholars from economics, and there are scholars from political science and from history. Those who took, those who participated in these, surveys and experiment to understand the reasons behind the backwardness of these developing nations. And among them, if we see, many of you might be knowing, there was an economist called W. Rostow. Then there was a sociologist called Alex Inkells. There was a psychologist called David McClelland. There are many those who actually participated in this debate, and those who actually carried out several you know studies. And if you see, basically these studies, carried out in different countries, different continents, covering different target groups, and they come up with the results which were quite surprising. And those results or outcome of those studies made it possible for the planners and development uh, policymakers to carry out or to implement modernization, or to implement certain programs in those developing nations. But before that, before we start discussing about those perspectives, let's discuss about what are the important characteristics of the process of modernization. Basically, if we see, uh, there is a scholar called Samuel P. Huntington, who wrote a very famous book called The Class of Civilization. And the same scholar actually who wrote an essay called The Change to Change Modernization, Development and Politics, where actually he outlined several characteristics of process of modernization. And he said, Huntington was of opinion that modernization and by implication development is a revolutionary process, and efforts are made to transform rural agrarian cultures into urban industrial cultures. And uh, as you know, there was from the beginning, I clarified that modernization basically means there is shift from rural to urban transformation. And similarly, the Alvin Toffler, who described the you must be knowing Alvin Toffler is he basically is a social scientist, but usually his works, publications, we consider them as a kind of with a kind of novel, or journalistic, kind of writings. Among Toffler's book, you must be knowing The Future Shock, then The Third Wave. So, Toffler defined this process as a kind of move from the first wave to the second wave. And basically, if we see the second characteristics of modernization would be the process of both modernization and development are complex and multidimensional, with a series of cognitive, behavioral, and institutional modification and restructuring. If you remember correctly, I said how actually psychologists are also involved to understand that how we perceive development, how we understand development, what development means to us, or what development, the meaning of development, what the way we perceive the meaning of development in the context of India may not be people from Latin America the same way they will perceive development. So basically how we, it's a kind of cognitive process, they say. It's a behavioral, trait. And if we see, it's development as well as modernization both are systematic process, since variation in one dimension produces important co-variations in other dimensions. Basically, it's they are very correlated, which Huntington means, and the Huntington was of opinion that modernization and development both are global and lengthy processes. It takes time. All of a sudden, as you say, you cannot actually change your culture. You cannot adopt something all of a sudden new over the night. You cannot change yourself. And the movement towards the goals of modernization and development takes place through identifiable phases and subphases, and they are homogenizing processes. And homogenizing processes basically means, basically, when we become, you must have come across several old movies. If you remember correctly, the movie we watched, such as Sole, and very famous. And there are several other movies during, contemporary to Sole. If you see the dressing pattern, there was a time when actually, if you see, this bell-bottom pant, gained so much of popularity. The hippie culture, it gained so much of popularity. But then see, gradually it got homogenized. People, they have started following it. Any youth you see during those days, those who could afford, they were actually wearing those, kind of clothes. They were, going for those kind of styles, hippie, following hippie culture. It emerged as a kind of, modernization makes, homogenize things. And both are irreversible processes. And there are there are, yes, there are temporary breakdowns. The process gets slower during, at some point of time, but then there is no reversible, this is not a kind of reversible process. You cannot actually go back. You take the example, now we consider dressing pattern as a trait of modernization. We cannot go back to wearing dhoti, right? On a day-to-day basis. We cannot go to, eating, millet, or having millet in a marriage party, right? But earlier it was part of our traditional bread basket, which actually we changed because of modernization. Just a minute. So, so basically, it is irreversible, and Uh, they are progressive processes. In the long run, they contribute to human well-being and both culturally and materially. Human well-being, both actually they contribute to human well-being. Basically, if we see modernization, we have, yes, there are of course critics, especially the dependency school. They criticize the overall process of this uh, um, you know modernization, but then it's very progressive. One has to accept. You take the example of medical uh, field, you take the example of pharmaceutical sector, the amount of progress we have experienced, of course there are shortfalls, but then it could help us to achieve better life expectancy. There are many things, actually many things, and simply we cannot say going by it's a negative process, we could not actually make much progress. There are people those who are not getting benefit. Yes, there are difficulties, but then we could actually progress, and it's in true sense it is a progressive process, and in the long run they contribute to human well-being and both culturally and materially. I know many of you do not may not actually agree to this point with regard to culturally and materially, but then yes, but we have progressed. Uh, that I can say. And if we see, we'll start with W. Rasto, actually, who is one of the important, proponent of classical modernization school, and he provided a kind of different stages through which we can actually achieve economic growth. And those stages are very briefly, actually in the earlier class I discussed, those stages are the traditional society, then preconditions for takeoff, the drive to maturity, and the age of high mass consumption. And if we see, uh, in this stage, Rosto's, this model is, he derived this model from the flight takeoff model, where actually he make a comparison of a country's economic growth with the way actually a flight takes off from the ground. And if we see, he uh, called this first stage as the traditional society, where actually the mobility is uh, very low, and the scope for change is very much restricted. It's basically a traditional society, very rigid society. Then the preconditions for takeoff. Basically, preconditions for takeoff is a stage. Those many of us know with the familiar of many of us are familiar with the flight takeoff process, and we know that how a flight takes off. In the precondition stage, what happens, the flight, if you see the flight crew members, including the pilots, they come up with several advisories. They issue certain guidelines, they read it out loudly, they provide in details what to do, what not to do. They prepare the flight for taking off. They will tell you, you keep your luggages in this place, you lock this place, put your seat belt. Okay, so basically, when a country's economy, they prepare for the country prepares itself for takeoff. During the precondition of takeoff, it prepares itself for the development. And what they do, actually, they take all sorts of precautions or steps so that they should not end up with the crisis. That is the major objective. Then the third step is takeoff. Many of all of us know that how a flight takes off. uh, if you compare, the flight takes off on a runway, and It start with a very slow speed, then gradually it picks up its speed, then it takes off. So in case of an economy, it starts slow, then gradually, it enhances its speed, then it takes off. Then the drive to maturity basically means, uh, when a flight actually, once it takes off, after a certain height, it becomes constant, which means, but then, to reach that stage, to reach that maturity stage, uh, the flight has to pass through different hurdles, like, might be knowing, sometimes we come across the news that the flight experience difficulties in flying, or reaching the height because of birds. They hindered, and they got crashed with the flight. Then there are several, there was turbulence because of climatic conditions. So, it takes actually time, as well as it has to overcome those crises to reach that maturity stage. But then, usually the flight gets into that stage, and once flight is settled in that maturity stage, it the next stage comes the age of high mass consumption. In the high mass consumption, the consumeristic society is created, where actually, once the society starts consuming more and more, then the economy is becomes sustainable. Basically means, it becomes stable, not sustainable. It becomes stable, which means there is less chance of experiencing crisis. There is less chance of experiencing crisis, and uh, similarly, now we'll discuss about, the mm, Anthony Giddens, who is known for its contributions to modern sociology. And if we see his contribution with regard to studies on modernity is significant. And Giddens given he has given, to Giddens, modernity is given dynamism by three essential aspects, which actually core to Anthony Giddens' analysis. The first one is the time-space separation. The time-space separation basically means, just a minute. I'll have some water and. So, sorry. So basically, the time-space separation is one of the important component of Giddens, uh, perspective of on modernity. And Giddens says that with modernization, time was standardized. In large part, social interaction does not take place at same time and in the same place. Basically, a relationship with those who are physically absent and increasingly distance become more and more likely. New technological measures also call for expansion of our space, which means that we can be in the same space, though not necessarily in the same locally. The modern national organization, for example, has been able to connect the local and the global in new ways. A modern company can function because it has been possible to break the time space connection. You take the example is of work from home. Now it is uh, no more actually the one of the important hindrances for functioning of the organization. And the second component through which Giddens tried to give the kind of dynamism given by modernity is the disembedding of the social system. Earlier, the institutions and actions of society were embedded in the local community, and the condition has changed because social relations are lifted out of the local interaction context by disembedding mechanisms. And Giddens distinguishes between two types of disembedding mechanism which contributes to the development of modern institutions. One is symbolic token, the other one is expert system. And money can be the example of symbolic token. And basically and the expert system are defined as system of technical accomplishment or professional expertise that organize large area of material and social environments in which we live today. And the third component is reflexivity of modern society. And this concept, usually the reflexive modernity, it was not only Giddens actually who extensively discussed about. There are actually others those who also discussed about reflexive modernity at large. And there was someone called, you must be knowing, Ulrich Beck, who extensively discussed about reflexive modernity. In Ulrich Beck's theory of risk society, where actually he emphasized and discussed elaboratively on risk, and he said that in reflexive modern society, the risk is anticipated and people take steps well in advance. Reflexivity basically means, it's a form of knowledge basically. Giddens means which people they use in a modern society anticipating the forthcoming crisis. You see reflex. If you you see the meaning of, if you deconstruct the meaning of reflex basically means, when a cricketer plays, a fielder is fielding in the field, or a footballer or a goalkeeper when he is, you know, standing, in front of the goal post, uh, with the role that he has to prevent the goal. But then, who can become a good goalkeeper? Usually, if you see, the person with highest reflex, he can be a good goalkeeper. The reason is reflex basically means with what speed the football is approaching, in what direction it might turn, and how to, if till what height, if the goalkeeper jumps, he can prevent the goal, or to what extent he can uh, jumps, to the left, he can prevent the goal. So it largely depends upon the reflex of that particular individual. So reflexive modernity basically means when modern society, evolves, it emerges. Usually, what happens, modernity brings series of risks. That is what actually Giddens as well as Beck they were arguing. And when risk is coming, people used to take because they use reflex. They have reflexivity. Society itself has reflexive understanding of what kind of risk might approach. And mm, basically, if we see in modern society, you take the example, many of us, those who are driving motor cars, motor vehicles, those who have health insurances, life insurance, covers, we know that the motor vehicle cost, if you are buying a small budget car of spending 6 lakh rupees, you take the example, and you see you'll be paying 20,000 per year, insurance premium. You calculate, if you are driving for 10 years, you'll be paying 2 lakhs as insurance premium. Can you imagine 2 lakhs as insurance premium, which is nearly 30%, more than 30% of your car's original price, the purchased value. Can you imagine 10 years if you have not experienced any sort of accident, any sort of adversities? That means you have lost those 2 lakh rupees. You imagine, but then why you went for purchasing 10 years insurance? All those long 10 years, each year you started, you have renewed your, uh, you know, subscription, premium subscription. What was the requirement? The reason is, even though last 5 years you did not experience any sort of accident, any sort of crisis or adversities, but still you are anticipating that who knows, tomorrow while going to through the national highway, who knows that my car might get crash with something or get accident, uh, meet with an accident. Nobody knows, but then reason is, we are living in such a society that that society, the reflexive modernity, it guides us that the risk is approaching. So in case of health insurance, see, a 30-year-old adult, 25-year-old adult, he starts playing or she starts paying rupees 15,000 per year at an early age, young age, and by the time he reaches the age of 75, 80, he would pay per year around 70,000, 80,000 as health premium, health care cover premium. Can you imagine till he almost pays almost 30, 40 lakhs, and last 30 years he never visited the hospital, but still then he pays the health insurance bill premium. The reason is, he doesn't know that the risk is, he doesn't know that tomorrow, do not know that tomorrow I might experience some health crisis. You also don't know, you might experience X, Y, Z. Nobody knows that tomorrow they might experience health, crisis. And the reason is, not only why actually, this reflexive modernity comes, because modernity comes with a kind of, it is not priceless, it comes with a price, and that price is environmental crisis, the price is health crisis, the price is pollution, the price is health hazard, in all sorts of negativity with negative, returns. Modernity comes, that doesn't mean that there is no positive side of it, but then there is this negative side, which actually, compels the people of, or the, the people of a modern, particular modern society, to act accordingly. And now we'll discuss about the liberal perspectives on development. And liberal perspective, basically, it was just a minute. I will ask. All of you are clear with the modernization perspective. Anyone can respond actually.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So basically, uh, the liberal perspective. In our day-to-day life, we are mostly many of us are familiar with this expression called liberal. He is so liberal, she is so liberal, XYZ is liberal. Uh, and when it comes to being liberal, uh, the expressions in household, we tell that everything we call, we inform to our mother, and we consider mother is liberal. In a classroom, usually we prefer some teachers, they are very liberal because they take up students issue seriously, they keep it as a kind of private matter, they console them. So usually students, they come to them, and they opine, they view, or they consider those teachers are liberal. And when it comes to economy, usually a country's economy is considered liberal if it removes all the barriers existing for the economic activities. And India was not a liberal country in terms of its economic policies till 1991. And many of you know that when P.V. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister and Manmohan Singh was the Finance Minister, we brought in the policy of LPG liberalization, privatization, and globalization, where actually we removed all barriers. We have loosened all the ties which were very rigid, and we had opened all the doors for a kind of liberal economy, and all the trade barriers or trade restrictions were removed to facilitate FDI, foreign direct investment. So liberal basically means it has a kind of different meaning in the different context. When it comes to an individual liberal, it is usually means it's his or her psychological approach, or his mentality, how he deals with certain events. When it comes to the culture, we consider a culture very liberal when it accepts all sorts of modalities, all sorts of traits, all sorts of changes. You take the example of certain religion which are very much rigid with regard to the practices, with regard to the dress code, with regard to religious ceremonies, with regard to restrictions or taboos in terms of marriage, in terms of kinship relationships. So basically, if we see the with regard to liberalism, uh, liberalism came with the European Enlightenment, and liberalism developed in the 19th century. And the European Enlightenment basically means enlightenment came with the idea that when people started questioning the basic existence of certain laws, you know, when the first step for enlightenment was when people started questioning, the dominant notion. Earlier, how in the enlightenment, the tradition was begun. Earlier it was considered as that the Copernicus, this thesis, that Earth was constant and Sun was revolving around Earth. But then people have started questioning that notion, and people started searching the scientific reason and scientific causes behind for the societal functioning. Why actually sun is rising in the morning, why it is setting off in the night, why actually in the daytime it is going above the head, why in certain days moon we can see full moon, why in certain days actually we can see the size of the moon, it goes down, it slenders down. So basically, but then people have started this question, people started questioning this, and that was the reason earlier, because earlier people the all regions, all science, everything was ended, or everything was confined only with the uh, king, or only with the monastery, and whatever king said, it was considered to be the truth. Whatever the king said, it was considered to be the truth. And that was the reason actually why people they lost their life. You take the example of Socrates, who was killed by because through given hemlock, and others, those who actually started protesting, and giving raising their concern about the difference between truth and false. And when people started questioning that, then enlightenment started. That was the beginning of, or the stepping stone of enlightenment, beginning of the enlightenment era. And the way you see actually, we conceive the contribution of Aristotle, Plato, and Rousseau, that was the actual beginning of enlightenment era. And they have started questioning the societal rules and regulation and laws through their writings. जो with the book we read, the Republic, then the politics, everything, they have actually basically started questioning the basic science and logic behind uh, those occurrences and happenings. And liberalism, as I said, it was first, as I said, most people, they like to be called as liberals, because we call it as a kind of very open-minded. See, he is very open-minded. See, she is very open-minded. Our ex-leader is open-minded. So basically, liberalism basically means, liberalism is an ideology, and which uh, you know frees or loosens the ties of rigidity, and it makes free the economy to float. And now even we are living in a society which is much more actually flexible, which we call it as neoliberal, which means it is much more flexible than the uh, liberal one. And basically, it was the when it comes to liberal thought, it starts with it starts with John Locke, who there are others, there are several others, but then usually his thought is considered to be one of the important contributions to this field. And libertarianism has its roots in the writings of the 17th century English political philosopher John Locke, who emphasized the priority of individual rights to life, liberty, and property, and the elimination of coercive intervention by the state, which is taken as the prime violator of liberty. And mm, and if you see the liberalists, they always believe often the liberal beliefs often contradict with socialism and conservatism. And when you studied emergence of sociology, I'm sure you must have taught how actually there was class between liberalism and liberal thought and the conservative school of thought. How actually they, every time Day Bonald, Day Mystery, August come, how they actually had a kind of difference of opinion with the liberalist, and who considers, especially the conservatists, they always criticize liberalists, saying that they always actually open the door for confrontation and rebellion. And uh, formally, this liberalism concept actually it came to the text, uh, the principle called laissez-faire principle, which was propounded by Adam Smith. And if we see the liberal state, actually how it basically emerged. Basically, in the 19th century, commercial interests in England were specifically geared to limit the power of the state. As we see, the state proposed cooperation and started controlling the movement of capital for the public interest. And the liberal state at this stage was not a laissez-faire state, but one in which intervention was required to create or maintain the condition for private accumulation of wealth. You must actually keep in mind when we are discussing about this, uh, you must know the difference actually. Why the state can also be liberal state, but then being the state liberal and uh, state living or uh, losing its grip over the economy, those two are absolutely different things. Being a state liberal and being a state liberal in terms of laissez-faire principles, those are two different things. The reason is, even though our state 1991 state, we had a kind of liberal state, we welcomed liberalization, we adopted liberalization, but then we are not actually our state's principles, then we are not actually accepted liberalism as a kind of laissez-faire principle. The reason was still state had a kind of control over the economy. The reason was, since the Indian economy was never exposed to such kind of unregulated market or free market economy. The state had a kind of fear that if they leave everything to market, there is high possibility of people losing people losing the trust of the state, the faith they have over state. The reason is why actually, if a company comes and he invests on the Indian land, they recruits the people of India, then all of a sudden actually if over the night it leaves the India. The state had the fear that the free economy cannot be trusted, and because of that actually the state took the step to have a control over it. And that was the reason actually, if you see, uh, the agricultural market did not get liberalized. And if you see the recent years farm laws protest, They tried to liberalize agriculture, but at the end they failed. The state failed, and there are several other actually sectors. You see, still this date, our health sector, it is still under the control of state. Our transportation with regard to railway, it is under the state. It is not liberalized. Once it is liberalized, now see, the air transportation medium is liberalized. Now there is no state intervention. Air India lost its grip. It was sold to a private player. Now there is no absolute, control over it. Those who are actually, if you can, those, the parents, those, if you can ask actually your parents, those who are actually frequently traveling in the flights, 5 years back, how actually the price of the flight tickets were regulated. People from Chennai to Bhubaneswar, they traveled. I myself traveled paying 2,900 rupees. But now the minimum fare, if you see, it is uh, around 7-8,000 minimum. And if the date is closer, your traveling date, it is the flight is, the fare is much higher. But then earlier there was regulation. But then the foreign players actually, the capitalist, capital, investor, they were actually unhappy with the state's role. So they made it a point so that they could play with the market, and it is called free market, where actually, laissez-faire principle is followed. And in this sector, now see, over the night actually train fare cannot go up. How much might be the inflation? It cannot go up actually. 500 rupees ticket can't be 1,000. It will go up to 600, 700, 800 maximum. But rarely it goes actually. Such kind of, changes we have not seen in the past. And the reason is, the state remains as a kind of watchdog, spreading its safety net uh, across the country, across the community, across the regions. And so, in case of other sectors, health sector, you see, we are still massive actually public sector undertaking, government hospitals, run by public sector undertaking organizations. And if you see, the still state is investing so much into these organizations. So we have universities run by the state, educational institutions run by the state, so that the market, the private, educational institutions, they do not actually get the space to play freely in the market. You see, there are private schools now. You won't imagine actually the amount we paid for our post graduation degree in 2 years for admission. Now it is, for a fifth class student, the monthly charges, or the monthly, fees, school fees, is much higher than that. We can't actually, and you see, if you compare the school run by the state government or central government, and the school run by the private, organizations, there is huge difference in terms of. And why actually it is happening, the reason is, there is, they have a different domain. And once you leave this, the if you close down the, public sectors, schools run by government, state and central governments, you will see actually the prices, the fee structure will shoot up uh, significantly. So, but then if we see, it was started with industrialization, and till this date, these principles are getting, spreading, because of this process of modernization and the expansion of uh, industrialization. And basically, uh, the liberal thinkers, they do not accept that Now we will be discussing about social inequality. Liberal thinkers, they do not accept that inequality is inherent in society. Rather, it is treated as socially constructed. Inequality is therefore liable to be addressed and removed. Since individuals are born free and equal, the state ought to be run with the consent of those on whom its authority rests. And the welfare state, which was given by the concept was given by Keynes, it is one of the you know important components, and it is one of the debatable topic of the recent decades. Shifting from the laissez-faire argument of zero role for state, to Keynes argued that equilibrium could be established before reaching that point. A society can achieve full employment by stimulating aggregate demand with active state intervention. And it means, Keynes basically means that the equilibrium should be maintained, and there should be everything. If you leave to the market and based on laissez-faire principle, then there will be crisis. So he actually threatened, the countries to make a kind of balance or follow a kind of balance approach. And the next is the emergence of neoliberalism. And neoliberalism basically means it is a kind of perspective which believes that the economics should different economies or different countries' economies should run through the laissez-faire principle, and there is no other alternative existing apart from giving free hand to the state. Then we'll discuss about the Marxian perspective on development, uh, how actually perspective on development actually works, and how it is related to development. You know, basically, Marx, uh, he was a uh, he was not only a thinker. He was a thinker as well as a theoretician. To an extent, he proposed a methodology based on scientific principles, based on a rigorous analysis of statistical information. At the same time, he proposed an idea of a society, communist society, which is not realizable, and which we cannot actually realize, and it is people, they call it as a kind of utopian mindset which compelled Marx to come up with such a kind of society. So basically, Marx said that development is a kind of process which can only be achieved through continuous class struggle. And it said that Marx said that in the concept of class remains central to the Marx analysis. Can anybody answer what actually Marx meant by class? Anyone, whatever comes to your mind. It is not that you will have to answer correctly. Whatever you know about. Nobody. This classroom is increasingly becoming a kind of one-way transaction, which makes me boring.
Means position.
Position, which makes me making position. Who said? Soumya Sucharita. Vishwajivan. What did you say?
Social
Position.
status,
Very good. What?
social status,
Can you be little louder?
status,
Status. Okay. Okay. Good. Who else? Vishwajivan, your what is your background actually? Which subject you had in your undergraduation UG? This is
Sir,
this is the first
BSc
post graduation
Agriculture.
course, or you had another post graduation course earlier?
No, sir, I'm BSc Agriculture background.
BSc Agriculture. Okay. Soumya Sucharita,
BSc Botany.
BSc Botany. So you all are from science background. So then there is less possibility of knowledge. So basically, basically Marx class, he conceived it differently. Vishwajivan, actually Marx never discuss about status. Okay. Uh, Marx, it was Max Weber actually, he brought in the concept of status into class. Okay. So Karl Marx, he conceived class as a concept which was central to his analysis. He conceived class as a kind of group of people, those who share similar relation to the means of production. Those who are basically uh, there are different classes, in different societies, basically, he said. And he said that the class position is always determined by the ownership over means of production. And means of production basically means through which you can actually produce, like capital. Capital includes money, land, machineries. Those means of productions you must have to when you go for, you know or initiate the production. So that, and class position is always determined by the ownership over means of production. If you are not owning the means of production, then you belong to the other class, that is the working class. And if you own the means of production, then you belong to the owning class. Then Marx said that development can be achieved through class struggle. He said that a revolution is the only way through which, or conflict is the only way, or class struggle is the only way through which society changes. And he said that capitalism is the best society when it comes to self-sufficiency and production efficiency. And he said that uh, to for class conflict, or class polarization, there is there must be class consciousness. And to have that class consciousness, the class for itself must be realized, which means basically class in itself and class for itself, actually two different concepts actually he propounded. And she said that class in itself basically means when you do not know the conflicting relationship with other classes, that means you are getting exploited, but then you don't know that you are getting exploited. And the class for itself basically means you know that you belong to a particular class, and the other class is exploiting you. That means your class antagonistic relationship you are aware of. Then mm, and he said that Marx said that capitalism is a transitory phase, and it will teach people to produce more. Society will be more prosperous. Of course, there will be class differentiation in the advanced stage of capitalism, and people will go for conflict. There will be class struggle between the bourgeoisie and proletariat, and mm, it will lead to class conflict. And as a result of which society will experience change. And uh, but Marx said that there will be a time when actually, after capitalism, there will be a phase actually where state will take over the economy, where actually in case of Russia and China it happened. Though people they do not accept that, scholars they do not accept that China is a socialist country. No, there are also crony capitalists like Jack Ma and others, those who could able to accumulate more money, and from where actually they brought the money, that is the question they pose. Similarly, those who also they also question the Russian aristocrats, Soviet aristocrats, those who own a tremendous amount of the national economy. How, if that is a socialist country, how they could able to actually own so much? But then Marx envisioned a kind of egalitarian society, which is called as the communist society, which is, though it is he envisioned, it is still many of us think that it cannot be realized. That is why actually he was considered to be uh, one of the utopian thinkers. Then there are several others, those who actually brought revised Marx idea and make a kind of presented a kind of critical analysis of this modernization process. And among them his name was A.G. Frank, who provided a kind of model called development of underdevelopment, where actually he brought the concept of metropolis satellite, and he said that all the advanced colonial countries, they actually exploited the underdeveloped countries. That is why actually they are backward. Where actually modernization perspective scholars like Alex Inkels and others, they believe that uh, you know the countries are backward because they belong to a backward culture. They are so rigidly tied with their backward culture. They do not want to improve themselves. But A.G. Frank was of opinion that you cannot expect them to be developed because you have exploited them for centuries, and you have extracted those countries, and you have removed all the valuable resources from their earth's crust, and you have exported to England and many other advanced countries like United States of America. Now you are saying that they are backward because of their backward culture, but you are not saying that you have exploited them for 100 years, 150 years, 100 years, 200 years. And those 200 years pushed them backward for almost uh, you know 20 some thousand years. So that cannot be compensated, and you cannot actually blame their culture, blame their tradition, and because of that they are backward. So that was the major stance of these new Marxist thinkers or dependency school thinkers. And they said that there are instances like why actually you developed Bombay, why you developed Kolkata, because you wanted to establish different metropolis, and those metropolis were connected through train lines. Like Bombay Thane expressway was established so that goods can be exported to Mumbai port, and from there it was exported to England. So he cited different examples saying that how actually England looted many of the developing and developed countries. And now he was of opinion that now you cannot actually play the drum saying that they are backward, and you cannot be sit in the you know chair and say that this you are backward because of your culture, because you must not hide that fact that you have exploited them for centuries. And then the neo-Marxian approach came into existence, which again tried to revitalize or revise the Marxian school of thought, and it was actually the proponent was Immanuel Wallerstein, who published a piece called The Modern World System. And there actually he provided actually how the core, periphery and semi-periphery countries actually they experience different levels of exploitation. Being a core country, the advanced countries like of Europe and North America, those wealthy countries, they actually established their industries in peripheral countries like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and those countries, and there are semi-peripheral countries like China, Portugal, Greece, where actually they operate their market. You see, we are purchasing Apple products, iPhones, MacBooks. See, but then how it is regulated? We remained at the receiving end. We purchase from whom? We purchase from China. The iPhone we use, the MacBook we use, the other gadgets, mostly advanced gadgets like HP laptop or other. There are several. I'm only talking about the gadgets which I am familiar with, and we purchase them. But then, if you see the manufacturing place, it is written as designed in California, manufactured in China. And what we see, the industry is established in China. They get Chinese people. They get employment. They are the semi-peripheral countries. The core countries remained USA, and it this based on their ideas, based on their knowledge, their copyright, they actually opened an industry in China. So Chinese people, they got employment. Then we remained at the receiving end. We pay tax to China as well as California, and uh, we purchase gadgets. And who extracts the benefits? Mostly semi-periphery, and significantly the uh, developed countries. Then mm, we see the next is the Gandhian perspective of development. Gandhian perspective of development basically. Will today, since we have not taken break, I'll conclude my class in another 5-10 minutes. Okay. So this is the last section. Uh, Gandhian perspective, we consider it as a kind of alternative perspective of development. Since perspective basically, what we mean by a perspective, if I can show you, yes, perspective basically the way we see things. See, this is a cell phone, and now if I ask you how it looks like, and you will say that it looks flat. Now if I turn it like this and I ask how it looks like, you will tell me that it looks very slender, very thin in design. Now if I turn it like this and I ask how this looks like, you might say it looks slender and it is short. So perspective basically means the way we look at things, and the way same development of or same underdevelopment of the or the same backwardness. You take the example of backwardness. Why India remained backward? Why Pakistan remained backward? Bangladesh remained backward. Sri Lanka remained backward. Nepal remained backward. If you ask the scholars of modernization perspective, they would say that these countries, they remained backward. The reason was their culture is backward. That is what actually they said. Their mentality is backward. Alex Inkel said that in his book, in his paper, How to Make a Man Modern, titled How to Make a Man Modern. He said that people, they are not ready to accept the values of modernity. And he said that similarly, McClelland, they said there is no achievement motivation involved in those third world countries. That is why they are backward. There is nobody is willing to achieve something. There is no motivation to make them aspire to achieve something. So that was their perspective. They looked backwardness of those underdeveloped countries from that perspective. You see how the perspective changed when it comes to the Marxian school of thought. They considered why actually India is backward, Nepal is backward, Pakistan is backward, Bangladesh is backward, Sri Lanka is backward. They said that these countries are backward because the colonial government, the British government exploited them for centuries. See, this is their perspective. One school of thought considered this, the culture and tradition of these countries responsible for backwardness of um, backwardness of these countries. But then another perspective, it believed that these countries are backward because they were exploited by the colonizers. But then there was another perspective which remained confined to the land of Asian continent, and it is called as the Gandhian perspective, which believed that Sarvodaya basically means the rise of all, and the use of the revival of cottage industries could bring actual development of this development of India. And Gandhi believed that he was a non-believer of this one jacket fit for all approach. If you go to a if you go to a kind of shopping mall purchasing a shirt, you will get 3 to 4 different sizes, right? 39, 40, 42, 44, 46, like that. And but then same thing if you go to a tailor to with a cloth, piece of cloth to stitch a shirt or to stitch a pant or stitch a kurti, if you see, and you even though you take the shirt from a shopping mall and you wear it, even though it gets fit you well, but then if you when you go to a tailor and if you he takes the measurement and he stitches a shirt or she stitches a shirt for you or a cloth for you, if you compare with the purchased one and if you compare with the stitched one, there will be difference in every aspect. And why actually it is, and you will like the ones which was stitched because it was stitched, the stitching was made on the basis of your actual measurement. And uh, that fit, the one jacket fit for all approach was given by the modernization perspective. Basically in the beginning they said that you want to become modern, you will have to do certain things. Yes, you will have to give away, you will have to leave agriculture, you come up with industries, you opened, transportation system, you developed the communication system, then you will be developed. But then Gandhi was quite, he had a kind of non-agreement to this condition. He said that India's topography is different, India's people are different, India's culture is different, India's food culture is different, everything is different. We cannot actually go for a model which was generated in the West, examined in the West, applied in the West, and we cannot apply it in a country where actually maximum of the proportion of the population reside in the villages. So he came up with a model called Sarvodaya model, and he was of opinion that uh, that revival of khadi and village industries can bring actual change, and it can make the village and the village population self reliant. They can you know it can actually bring a kind of stability in the rural economy. Then education for all, for men, women, uh, you know uh, for everyone, education can bring actually uh, change. Then economic progress is and real progress. He said that there should be balanced development. Economic progress does not mean the whole and soul of the concept called progress. There are different dimensions to attach it, and one must not only focus on the economic progress. There should be the progress in the value system. There should be. He actually tried to provide a kind of perspective through which we can have kind of actual progress. Then Swadeshi, he said that the use of uh, goods manufactured in our own country, designed in our own country, produced in our own country, will bring a kind of will make our country's economy more self-sufficient and more reliable, and it can actually make our country more sustainable, especially with regard to economy. And that was actually his alternative standpoint, and he was not in agreement with the modernization perspective. He said that yes, we will go for industrialization, but not the industries which the western countries want. We will go for the industries which our people want. That is what actually he suggested for cottage industry. So that was his alternative perspective, and that is why actually we celebrate every year. Every year, actually, we are celebrating Gandhi Jayanti, and if you see till this date, even though the cottage industries, they are actually financially, they are not performing well, but still then the government is pushing it very hard for the survival and revival of it. And if you see in the market also now, people are gradually actually, to my belief, they are little bit, they are inclining towards the products manufactured in rural India. If you see Khadi and Gramodyog departments, they are slowly actually progressing. They are slowly actually their revival is taking place. So mm, that's all. So any doubt in today's class? Anyone can respond. If you are, it gives me an impression that nobody is listening me. No, sir. Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you. So shall we conclude here? So then we'll meet tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.